Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Get Into Flow. I am excited to welcome someone who is all about the flow in her own way. She has her own flow method that she's going to tell us about. Welcome to Vanessa Wright.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation. It's been a long time coming. It was scheduled a while ago, but the minute you told me that you have a flow method, I was like, okay, well, you got to come on the Flow podcast.
That's right.
How could you not?
It was like perfect timing, too.
Amazing. And what a way to kick off the year. We're still in January, right? So we're still into that new year, new mindset. And speaking of mindset, we're going to unpack so much when it comes to mindset and how to help yourself. And so I'm just so excited to have Vanessa here and tell us a bit about yourself, Vanessa.
Sure. So I am a newly minted 50-year-old, and I said that's going to be my whole personality for the year. It's like really leaning into being 50. I am a certified life coach for midlife mothers. Typically, I work with. I'm a published writer, a speaker. I'm also a homeschooling mom of 3 teens. We've been homeschooling since 2010. So that's a part of where my journey actually came out of a lot of this work I've been doing with my own self and my kids. And I have one son who's almost 20 and he's graduated and lives out on his own. I've got twins who are almost 18. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot. And then I work for a large a company that does mindset work for kids. So I've been in the mindset area with this company for the last 7 years. So that's also just helped me tremendously navigate this path. So yeah, I'm really excited to chat more.
You have so much experience when it comes to mindset. I'm so excited to dive in about that. But first, tell us about this famous flow method.
Yeah, so it came out of my own uh, journey with burnout. Really, it kind of happened um, back in 2018. I was working with a coach because I've had a coach since 2009 in some form, so I'm a really big believer in having outside support and that. And she asked me straight up, she's like, "So how are things flowing?" And I was like, they are not flowing. I said I was on the riverbank, splayed out, like completely just like completely abandoned myself. I was just super burned out. I said nothing's flowing at all. I just feel like every day. I mean, I was working from home at the time. Still, my kids were younger, like homeschooling, and just a lot was going on. And you get really good at just like pushing through, pushing through, pushing through until you can't anymore. And I was starting to see the signs because I had diagnosed like medical burnout or maybe like in 2013 or 14. So I was starting to feel and see those signs again happening. And I was in perimenopause this time and then going in 2018. And so that there was that. So I took the word flow. I am a writer. I've been writing since I knew I had hands. That's what I always say. And so I wrote the word flow in my journal and I just started playing around with, well, what does that look like for me? Like, again, this was just super personal. What does it look like for me? And I kind of came up with this method, which we can talk about in a second. I was like, okay, let me just lean into this. And then I started sharing on my Instagram account, which was mostly homeschooling stuff at the time. But then that kind of started snowballing. And then, like, I just found myself speaking about it. I did a workshop at a homeschool conference, and then people were asking me more about it. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something here to this. And then fast forward to the end of 2020, and a different coach I was working with at the time, she's like, "You know, you're a coach, right?" She's like, "You know that like you have to be a coach." I was like, "I'm almost 46. What are you talking about?" And I just jumped in, and I was like, "Okay." I went through coaching, got certified, got published. My flow method got published in a book with other women, and it's literally they've been this like stuff that I had not anticipated and planned for, but here we are. So that's my little story in a nutshell.
But isn't that also the definition of flow, which I
Yeah,
love, just going with
yeah,
the flow, going with
yeah,
emotions and seeing
yeah,
where it takes you, which is amazing.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Now, you mentioned something that I could definitely relate to, burnout,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I talk about a lot on this podcast because for me, I feel like my burnout experience was important because it led me to where I am today. It forced me to ask these hard questions about myself and where I was at in my life and my career. Was I still happy? And we often don't want to ask these questions because we know the answer. And the answer means that like you got to make a change and change is scary,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to mindset, How did mindset play a role for you in that particular experience?
Yeah, so it's funny because I had started working for this company that does mostly mindset work for kids at the end of 2017. So it was this. If I look back on it, it was kind of like, oh, okay, universe, I see what you were doing, right? Like, so yeah, I can help my kids all day long with their minds, but what about myself, right? Like, what do I need to be shifting? How can I be curious? How can I break free from this like perfectionism? I'm the oldest child, oldest daughter, oldest everything, like super type it, right? Like, how can I break free from some of these traps that I've constantly put myself in, which again lead to the burnout when you're trying to do everything for everybody. When you feel like, and P.S. I still struggle with it. I just maybe struggle with it less, but it doesn't for me. It has not completely gone away, but it's just like opening up your mind because for at least for me, when I'm sitting there having to teach my kids and be their like sole, you know, not like teaching them and guiding them. I'm like, oh, I'm doing these things. And so that's like for me, it was like holding up a mirror and being like, oh, yeah, let's got to shift this. So with the flow, with the mindset, there was a lot of element of surrender. And then we can talk about that. That's actually like part of some of the flow is just like, where are you in this season of life? Like, where are you right now? And like having to surrender a little bit to that and say to yourself, I'm the only one that can make the change. Like that for me, it was like things aren't going to change unless I change them. And I talk a lot about with my clients, with other moms. I'm like, you can talk all day long about wanting this, wanting that. You're the one. Guess what? No one's coming to save you. No one's coming to say, hey, you should take a break. Hey, maybe you should take a nap. Hey, you should delegate. Like you have to be the one to do that. And so for me, that was the biggest like one of my biggest mindset shifts.
And that's huge. Nobody's coming to save you. Don't wait to get permission,
Right.
right? Like you got to take it yourself. You got to do it for
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people who suffer with burnout have in common from what I'm seeing from my personal experiences is that, like you mentioned, we're perfectionists, we're type A personalities, and we're trying to control everything.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I love that you say one of the biggest things that helped you was to surrender. And
Yes.
surrender can be really scary for someone who wants to be in control,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because surrendering, we feel, I think maybe we can talk about this a little because I think surrender, we feel in the sense of I just hold my hands up and I let go of whatever is happening. But I feel like there's still some part of us that needs to stay connected. And it's more about the trusting and the
Yep.
having faith that it's going to work out in the way that it needs to,
Yes.
instead of trying to force it to work in the way that you want it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me, there's like, for me, surrender is always paired with like my intuition, right? Like they have to work hand in hand. And so if I'm constantly trying to control everything, constantly trying to listen to all the outside things, then I'm turning off my intuition. I'm turning off that inner voice. But when I can surrender, let go. Like if we're going with that flow, if I'm getting into the river, I'm getting into my little boat and I'm flowing. And then there's this element of surrender of like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of go where I'm going to go where the water takes me, but I'm in my boat and I've got my paddle. So like, there's like a back and forth that has to happen. It's not like the gripping. Like I always think of like the control, the grip, the like, it's like this holding super tight. Surrender, you're just kind of opening your hands up a little bit, right? You're still guiding. Maybe it's a guiding, a surrendering, not this like grippy hold, like tight feeling. And it's really hard because it goes up, it can go up and down, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's definitely something that takes it's a constant practice, is what I'm saying. It's a constant practice.
Absolutely. And even the way that you describe it, that's exactly what happened with me in terms of I was trying so hard to grip and to control that I tuned out my inner voice and my intuition. And so as a result, I was disconnected from myself. And when I
Mm-hmm.
talk about my experience, I just remember being like almost an out of body experience of like not being connected at all to who I was, what I wanted. And so going through life and just going through the motions without any connection to what it is that I truly wanted, it almost felt like I was in a void and I was
Mm,
numb. And I think,
mm,
the missing piece there was the connection to the intuition. And a lot of us forget that that's what guides us and that we have all the answers within, but we just tune it out because the external noise is so loud.
Yeah,
So
it's
for
so
sure.
loud. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So how can we start to reconnect with that intuition?
Yeah. So for me, it was like going through this flow so we can just talk about like what that means. And I had to keep it something that's super simple that anybody, and I do like anybody can jump in and do it and you can tailor it to what works for you because it's funny as much as I like to follow rules I also don't like I don't also like anybody telling me what to do, so I needed a gentle container, a gentle practice, if you will, so that I could flow within that, if that makes sense. So, because left to my own devices, I will probably just like, I would just sit around like putting stickers in my journal, eating chocolate, and like, not just like, which is fine to do, but like, dishes still have to get done, kids still have to be places, I still have to take care of myself. So, with F, it just starts with this is like the foundational. It's like feed your body, mind, and spirit. And I leave it that general because I'm 50 years old. I've probably tried every single diet on the planet because, again, that's just like growing up 70s, 80s, 90s. Like I've tried it all. How are you feeding yourself? How are you physically feeding yourself? How are you mentally feeding yourself? What are you reading? Who are you talking to? What are you listening to? Spiritually, how are you feeding your spirit? Which for me ties back into my intuition. So I always like to start with F, feed your body, mind, and spirit. And for me, that changes season to season. So what am I feeding myself in the winter is going to look different than the spring, summer, winter, fall, whatever. And so it's just really getting clear what nourishes you, body, mind, and spirit. And that alone can be very difficult, but it's super important. Like we are beings walking around on this like planet. You have to be physically taking care and mentally and taking care of yourself for that, for F. Yeah. Do you want
Love.
me to keep? Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. Do you want to talk about more F, or I can go through the whole thing
Yeah,
if
you
that's
can go through
best.
the whole thing.
Okay.
I think that's super clear also
Yeah.
that just like we start with the foundation and what are
Yeah.
you feeding yourself? And I love that you also say that it differs season to season. So
Mm-hmm.
what could have worked last season doesn't necessarily work this season, or just to maybe more be aware of what you need.
Yes,
Right?
yes. And also to like what works for your friend isn't going to work for you, or like what you
Aha.
see the influencer on social media saying, like, and especially if you're in this like perimenopause menopause moment. I just want to put this in as a side. I love how menopause and perimenopause is having a moment right now, but there's also this like commodification going on around it, which is making me crazy. So it's like okay, like it's let's be like we can put a pin in that, but yourself the best. I think that's what I think. It's like your body the best, but we've been told since we were little girls usually that like no, you have to look like this, you have to eat like this, you have to do. So this is F. It's like feed your body, mind, and spirit, which then leads into L, which is to love yourself and lean into your season of life. So when I created this, my kids were like in elementary school and middle school, or maybe they were all three in middle school at the same time. I don't know. My season of life was very different. It's also very different from my sister at the time had like four toddlers under five. Like her season of life was different. And so really loving yourself where you are and what season of life you're in and being really clear about it. Like if you're a mom with babies, or if you're single and are full-time working, stuff like all of our seasons of life look different. Just lean into it. Lean into it. You may not thoroughly love being in it right now, but just lean into it and find those daily joys in it, because if you don't, then it's that control. It's that constant pushing up against it, which then goes into O, which is own your time and space. How does it do that? How are you owning your time? I'm talking about like, is your schedule completely overpacked? Like, do you not have white space to breathe? Are you doing things that you think you should be doing because other people told you you're supposed to be doing? Probably. What can you cut off? What can you get rid of? Your space around you. I'm talking about your physical space and your emotional and mental space. I don't think that's talked about enough, is like all the stuff that's going on in your head. And we can, like, from a mindset, right? Are you battling a lot of things, habits, perfectionism, thoughts that you've had since you were a child, since you were a teen? How are you dealing with those? And then in your physical space, I always say you've got to have a little space of beauty. I call it my flow space. Mine's over here, and it's like something I go to each morning. I've got my angel cards, my crystals, pictures of my grandmother's, just little pockets of beauty and space for yourself, just for you, not for anybody else. And then my favorite letter is W, which is to weed out what's not working so you can welcome something new. If you are constantly overburdened, overscheduled, not feeling physically well, not loving yourself, all this stuff, you're just kind of in the weeds, right? Like you gotta get rid of some things. And when you do, then you've got some space to welcome something new, to listen to that intuition. And the great thing about flow is that, again, it can change season to season. I like to start each season, I write FLOW down and what am I going to focus in on? I don't worry about the rest of the year. I just worry about my season I'm in. So that's flow in a nutshell. Yeah, that's flow in a nutshell. And that's kind of what I've been working on for the last several years consistently. And it has made a huge difference.
I love it. I love it. Like you said, it's simple, it's easy to understand. I think it's important to also approach it season by season, like you mentioned, because for us perfectionists and type A
Yeah.
personalities, we want to plan the entire year,
Mm-hmm.
right? We want to plan everything in advance.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to somebody like us? I call
Yeah.
ourselves recovering perfectionists because I know we're working on it,
Yeah.
right? So,
We are. We are. Bless our hearts. We are working on it. Yes, I would say nothing sustains the same energy over the course of the year. Like nothing. I mean, oh, I'm sure there's things, but like realistically, like if you look out your window and look at the tree or look at a plant, or they're not blooming all the year long. They're not growing all the year long. Like so from a cyclical standpoint, or the moon. I love personally working with the moon. Like the moon changes, right? How can you just lean into focusing in on your one season at a time? Because like that, you're going to get the also the biggest wins also because you're going to be like, oh, you're going to build that momentum, and you're not going to be like, oh, it's been 2 weeks, I've already fallen off the wagon, screw the rest of the year, and now this isn't going to work. It's like, nope, guess what, you wake up tomorrow and you start again, and that's it, right? And energetically, me, like I don't have a lot of energy in the summer, which I know like everyone's like, oh, summer, summer. I'm like, no, where I live, it's a bajillion degrees all day long, all night long. I don't have a lot of energy. I have more energy in the fall, probably the spring. Where are you? Like, if you have a menstrual cycle, that's going to look different for me. I'm postmenopausal. I don't have a cycle anymore. So I have to tune in cyclically, seasonally with the moon energetically. So again, it's really just starting to play and have fun with how you can make yourself like really be in your own flow and feel better.
hmm I heard a lot about timing your actions or building, let's say, your schedule or your business around a cycle, whether it be your menstrual cycle, whether it be the moon cycle, right? So I think there's definitely power in that energy. Since you have experience in that, can you talk to us a little bit about how that's helped you and how that's changed your approach?
Yeah, because back in 2018 when I created Flow, I was already like really in the thick of perimenopause. So I was already, for me, like skipping cycles. I would have them for 3 months and then not have it for 4 months. And so that reliability that I'd always had was gone. And um, it kind of threw me. I was like, oh, okay. So when you don't have your period for 4 months, you're in this like perpetual, I guess, like whatever the last phase, I'm blanking on the last phase of your cycle, and it's like the longest, like you're like waiting and waiting and you're tired and what's going on. So I had to start playing around with, well, okay, let me work seasonally first, right? Because in summer, in fall, in winter, I mean, I live where we have seasons, so that works. So you just really have to get curious. Well, does working with the moon work for you? It might not. And the thing is to not get perfectionist again and saying, I'm just going to work this and I'm going to have to work that. I just like to play and just be open to other ways of going through my days. And I think that's the biggest thing is find something that works that works for you and get curious, play with it for a season. If it doesn't work, try something else. Like no one's coming to like check off a box to and grade you on it, right? Mindset.
Mindset. That's a great segue into mindset because as the person who wants everything perfect and who was the straight A student because she did everything according to plan and it needed to go a certain way, now coming in and being like, I have no control over, example, my cycle.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point in my life where the body's just going to do what it needs to do. And it's frightening,
Hmm.
that loss of control again. So, the mindset, how can we adjust and shift our mindset to help us in
Hmm.
this, how do you call it? Middle life? Mid
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, well, obviously I'm 50. I'm long into it. Someone told me, I don't know if it was Brene Brown or someone said midlife is age 35 until you die.
Ah!
So,
That is a long
no,
midlife.
it was a long time. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So I think again, it goes back to this surrender, this tapping into who are you right now and how do you want to move forward. It's also hard if you're a person, again, you're like dealing with the perfectionism and then you're playing the like, oh, but I should have done what if I would have done all these things when I was 15 or 20 or 25 or whatever. It's like kind of got to let that go and just be where you are right now. So I've had to work a lot on presence, mindfulness, where I am now, because I will tell you that the transition I had into like menopause and postmenopause for about that last year was one of the hardest things mentally, physically that I've ever experienced. And I would rank it up there with like giving birth to my kids and like the hormonal like postpartum depression stuff I dealt with. That transition into menopause was for me really tough, and where I really had to lean into this flow concept. And I'm so glad I had already built those foundations for years, because I think if I hadn't, things would have gone even more sideways. And there was such a loss of control in that last year before I, could mark off 12 months without a cycle and say, okay, I'm officially postmenopause. It was really difficult and it was super challenging. To feel like you're losing. I felt like I was losing my mind. I was like, I can't focus, I can't write, I have to show up for business, I have to work, I have to, my kids, like I'm like their mom's either crying or yelling. Like it was a lot, and it was hard.
Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Let's dive even deeper because, as someone who's entering that phase of her life, we spoke briefly just before I hit record, but yes, menopause and perimenopause, it's a hot topic right now. There's a lot to consider, and I'm happy as well that we're talking about it, but we can maybe get your take, Vanessa, on
Mm.
maybe it's a little extra right now, a little too much. But what else is extra are the symptoms and
Oh,
how they differ and how is this, like we just said, the itchy ear, the itchy inner ear, how is that a symptom of
right,
perimenopause? Like I
right.
don't understand how all of
Yeah,
this adds up.
yeah. And then you start questioning like it. And that's the thing. And I was talking on a book club last night with a bunch of like moms were ages 40 to 50. And we're all like, well, my friend was like, was this perimenopause or is it this? Is it menopause or is it that? And it's like, nobody knows because nobody really studied women. Like nobody took the time to like study any of this stuff. And now they are finally. And I think that's just, again, that's part of this like leaning into your season of life that you're in, getting educated, finding other people who are in that same season with you. And don't be afraid to talk about it. I am so glad we're talking about it. Like when I was, really going through it in 2017, 2018, my big joke I was talking about at the time was hashtag, I would say hashtag perimenopause and hashtag the puberties, because all of my kids were going through puberty at the same time. And I was full of perimenopause.
Oh
And I was
my
like,
goodness.
this is the worst idea I have ever had. Like, nobody told me this was a stupid idea. Right. And so you have to keep some humor about it too. Like, you have to keep some humor about it. And also, can we just have like a moment that it's not this shadow topic? Like my mother, I didn't even know when she went. Like she did not talk about it. She did not talk about it until I went through it. Like, and she's in her 70s, and I was like, wow, that kind of would have been helpful if you would have told me this. Like, and I would have known a little bit to expect. So again, you just have, there's like a gentleness you have to approach it with, a gentleness for yourself, but some tenacity to get some answers and find people like either it's a doctor, a practitioner, an expert to work with you so that you don't feel completely untethered.
Great advice. I think even the community aspect, talking to other people who are going through it, not being afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm the one in my group of friends who will always bring it up. And maybe I'm annoying, but I'm like, ladies, who else am I going to talk about this with? We're all the
Right.
same age. We're all going to go through
Yes.
it. Can we just be open? Because I want to feel like I'm not alone. I want to feel like
Yes.
even these random symptoms, like you were saying, is it this or is it that? Like the itchy ear, is it allergies or is it
Right.
perimenopause? We
Right.
can go either way.
Right. It's like you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole with like symptoms sometimes, right? But that's where, again, when you know your body and you know yourself, taking inventory of, hey, do I feel a little bit different now than I did 6 months ago? Like tracking it. Like I had a beautiful symptom tracker that I used for like a whole year to try to understand because I had other health issues that I wasn't sure, like, because everyone's complex. Like it's not just one thing or another. And so I think just really advocating for yourself, really knowing yourself. Like I've walked out of doctor's appointments when they're like, "Oh no, you don't have this," and I'm like, "Bye." Like, no, I know I do. Like, don't start with
Yeah,
me. And so
absolutely.
I've done that. I've done that for my kids. I've argued and had to walk out of specialists because they were wrong. And you just have to advocate for yourself. And I will just keep saying this: find the daily joy. I've kept a joy journal for over 3 years. That's been a practice that really anchored in, helped shift my mindset a lot. With every single day, I write down at least 1 to 3 things that brought me joy, not gratitude, just plain joy. And so doing that every single night, you start seeing patterns of things that bring you joy, and you can look for them the next day and you can look for them the next week, even in those hard times. And that has been one of the biggest mindset shifts, was the daily joy. I still do gratitude, but joy for me has been my anchor for like the last 3 years.
I love that. It's the first time I hear that, and it's so true. Gratitude is one thing and it's
Yeah.
powerful in itself, but joy,
Yeah.
often when I ask people or coaching clients, what brings you joy? They don't know how to answer that question. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't either. When I came out of my burnout, when I was going through the healing after my burnout, I didn't know what brought me joy anymore.
Yeah.
We forget to look for it. We
Yeah.
forget to kind of just play and be curious.
Yes.
So I love that if you have a daily joy journal,
Yeah.
then you can start to build on that. I
Yeah.
love
It's so simple and it's free. It doesn't cost, it takes literally, it can take 30 seconds. And I started it in the middle, this was a couple of years ago. Again, it was struggle. I knew I was coming towards the end. Like I was in late stage perimenopause. I had 1 or 2 kids who were dealing with some major things. Like just life was, I say life was lifing. Is that what the kids say? And life was lifing. And I said, I have to start something. Because I said gratitude for me was just feeling, I wasn't feeling it. I was just, it felt super, I just felt kind of robotic. And I was like, no, I'm taking care of my joys. And it has just become this whole thing that I've, done working with clients, I've written about, talked about, and it is something I will just go to mat with over and over and over again. It's because joy feels different in my body than gratitude. Joy is like sunshine and movement. Gratitude always feels a little more reserved and somber, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just feels different in my body. And I love how it is. Even on the hardest days, I promise you, you can find something that's brought you joy.
It's true. I think joy can potentially bring us a little further than gratitude, depending on you, though. Like
They're
you said.
cousins. They're cousins. I say joy and gratitude are cousins, and they can work. They can pair together well. It's just sometimes I think we get so focused on gratitude, which again is you should be, but like
Mm.
we forget to have that joy and have that fun. I mean, even if it's just a handful. Like I remember writing down chocolate chips. Like that was the only thing that brought me one joy. That it was a handful of chocolate chips. But guess what? That counts. That
Absolutely.
counts. Perfectionists. That counts.
And speaking to perfectionists, going back to the gratitude, maybe it becomes more controlling,
Yes.
and you're controlling, you're forcing yourself to find gratitude. Like maybe that's where it becomes a little rigid, whereas joy
Mhm.
has a different energy around it, perhaps.
Abs 100%. I completely feel that. Yes, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, okay, well, I have to keep a gratitude journal and I got to go through the motions and I got to stay on point because that's who I am and check it
Yeah.
off my list, right?
Yes. And gratitude for me is also sometimes about other people and it's like more outward facing for me.
Mhm.
Joy is a little bit more inward because something that brought me joy may not, it's usually not related to another person necessarily. It could be that like the other morning I poured myself a matcha latte, true story, and it's been a crappy week this week, and so I poured myself a latte. This is Wednesday, and I happened to look down. I made my own foam. And there was a heart in my latte. Like I didn't do it on purpose, but I looked down and I saw it, and then of course I took 13 pictures, and I'm sending it to my friends because I'm like, I needed this sign today, and I'm like, that brought me so much joy because it was this beautiful unintentional thing, and that's what I'm talking about when I say that. Yeah.
Those signs that we're then open to receiving
Yep.
and observing.
Yes.
So we've been talking a lot about how to just, if I may say, make your own rules, how to
Mm-hmm.
break the mold, right? How to listen to yourself and how to do what works for you. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that has a lot to do with how our mindset is.
Yep.
And if our mindset is fixed because we have to do things a certain way, then we're not open to observing what else could work for us and we're really forcing. So
Mm-hmm.
having that growth mindset leaves you open to just observe, to be curious, like we keep saying, to play, to kind of work things out on your own. And so entering this season of life for women who are midlife, 35 plus, which is a great big range, but let's just say when you're around that age where you
Yeah.
start to notice those changes to
Mm-hmm.
your body and you start to lose that control,
Mm-hmm.
or if we can say that certainty that you once had of always expecting things working through the monthly cycle like
Mm-hmm.
clockwork, and all of a sudden the clock breaks down
Yeah.
or starts to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of mindset? In addition to perhaps the acceptance of this is where we're at, right? Like this
Mm.
is normal, this is what's going to happen in our body.
Yep.
The openness to talk about it, to be curious. I love that you say tenacity to get the information and to do what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you would add to that list from a mindset perspective?
Yeah. So I think these two kind of like play in together, which is like this constant love of learning and like that love of learning about yourself, because maybe you're at the time in your life where you have a little bit more time to learn about yourself, which maybe you didn't when you were in your teens or your 20s or your 30s, and now you're 40, 45, 50. And so like there's this love of learning. And then I always love the concept of beginner's mind, right? Like I'm 50, but I didn't even think about coaching until I was almost 46. Like because I had worked on my mindset a lot for the couple of years prior, that I was open to being like, yeah, I'm 46. Why not? Why can't I do that for myself? And some of it also comes from me as a homeschooling mom background. The way I tailored my kids' education for them was to be very different than normal, and so I was always giving them sort of a buffet of educational opportunities. And I said to myself, well, like, I want that for me. Like, I've been doing this for you all for like, I've been curating this for a long time. Now it's my turn. I want that for myself. So having that beginner's mindset, having that love of learning, and then really that fear of failure. I know we all get like hooked on like, well, what if I fail if I put myself out on social media? Or what if I fail and I write a blog? But how are you going to know if you don't do it? So, and I'm not saying that's just an example. Like it could be like, are you ready to have a career change? Are you ready to try a new workout program? For years, I told myself I hated weights and I was not going to be good at strength training because I couldn't handle it or it just wasn't. And last February, I said, you know what? I signed up for a 28-day challenge. I forced my sister, who's 6 years younger, I said, you're going to do it too. And I'm paying for it for your early birthday present. She's like, fine. And so I said, I'm going to commit to myself to do this. And if I hate it when I'm done, then, I won't pick up weights ever again, even though weight building strength training is really good for, people in my age bracket. And I have to tell you, not only did I love it, I stuck and I've done a challenge every single month since February. And I have physically felt better, mentally felt better. And it was because I said to myself, I went from that fixed mindset of, I don't like weights or blah, 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 whatever. And then I was like, being open and trying it and having that beginner's mindset with it. And that's like a really current thing that I've just experienced in the last year.
That's amazing. Challenging those old stories, those old narratives,
Yes.
right, that we've carried with ourselves for years
Mm-hmm.
as a form of protection, right, to
Mm-hmm.
keep ourselves safe, again, in the certainty. because the
Hmm.
uncertain is scary. But
Yeah.
like you said, Vanessa, how do you know if you don't try? And if there's any part of you that is curious, then I believe you owe it to yourself to explore.
You have to do that. And you not only do you owe it to yourself, like your older self will thank you for it. I just launched a Substack on my birthday at 1:30 in the morning. I know nothing about Substack. In fact, yesterday I was like, I think I accidentally did something wrong on mine. But I don't care. Like I completely did something wrong last week, and I was like, shoot. And then my teen daughter came in and she like helped me fix it. And but like that's the fun that you get also at this age and stage of life is like you can break those rules. Like there are no rules. This is not 1980. This is not 1985. Like I'm in my golden Swifty era. That's on my t-shirt my friend made for me. And so I'm like, how can I take my Golden Girls energy, but like make it 2025, right? So like, and I
Yes.
think that's fun, and it's fun.
It's all about fun. We have to
Yeah,
have fun.
yeah,
Life gets too serious, it gets too real, if I could say it that way.
yeah,
And like you said earlier, life is lifing. Yes,
yes.
that's what the youngins say these days. Learning from them every day, the new slang.
I say things and my kids are like, please do not say that ever again.
Yeah,
So I'm like, well, now I'm going to say it all the time.
exactly. Or they'll say something and I'll be like, can you elaborate? What does that mean? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like I'll literally stop in my tracks and be like, what are you saying right now? I don't know how to react.
Yes, thumbs up, thumbs down. I know it's
Yeah.
so funny.
So yes, but that also comes with evolution, right? Like we're always learning. Even at our age, we're learning now the new generation slang or what they're doing, and they have something to teach us, and we have something to teach them. So
Yeah.
definitely there's an exchange there, but at the base of it, it's like, how could we approach this with lightness, with
Hmm.
curiosity, with fun?
Yes.
And like I always say, you have one life and it's yours. And going back to what we said in the beginning, like no one's coming to save you, no one's coming to tell you what to do. And as much as you want someone to come and give you that roadmap or that blueprint and be like, here are all the rules to follow, even if you do that, guaranteed you will not be happy because it's
One.
according to someone else's rules, not yours.
Yes. Yes. Preach it. Yes. Let's put that
Yes.
on a t-shirt.
Yeah, I like your t-shirt. Yeah. I'll make my own about rules.
That's
Yeah.
right. I know. I have a side note. This is when, and then you get to be my age and your friends, like they just make you funny things and we don't care if they're offensive and you just wear them out in public and your kids are like, please don't.
Yeah. Make your own rules. You get to choose whatever feels good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but absolutely. I think, there's something so special about getting older, about being able to have these experiences and to surround yourself with people who are maybe going through similar things, to be able to share, to build community, and
Mm,
again, to create a life that you ultimately will love.
yes.
And you're never too old. Let's get rid of that word because if you were able to become a coach at 46, you know what I mean? Where it was like not even on your horizon,
It
and then
was
the
not on my
opportunity
horizon
came.
at all. Like, are you kidding? I was like, what do you mean? What? Like, no. And then I was like, okay, then I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And
Yeah.
and and then and then I wrote on my 2021 goal. I said I want to get published. I didn't know that was gonna happen. And literally by the end of February, I had signed a contract to like get, to be in a book. And I was like, oh, okay. So when you surrender to those things, and because I had weeded out some things in my life that
Mhm.
were no longer serving me, I had that room to come in. I had that energy, like that space for things to come in that a year or 2 years or 3 years were not anywhere on my radar, because you have to also do that to circle back. Like that's the important of constantly seasonally cultivating and moving through your flow and asking, does this work for me this season? What if I change it up here, and like make it fun and make it work for you, and just don't be so rigid about it, because also things are going to happen that you cannot plan for. You're right. So it's good to have some foundations. And then I talk about like, what are your bare minimum flow? Like if you have this big elaborate flow, great, but like, what are your bare minimum things? And, circling back, I'm like, you always have 5 minutes for yourself. And if you tell me you can't, I'm going to challenge you on that. In fact, you probably have 10 to 20 or 30 minutes for yourself. So like, again, your mindset, if you're constantly telling yourself, I don't have time for me, I don't have time for me, that's something like to look at, right? because no one's coming and saying like, oh no, here's 600 hours for like spa treatments and this. I'm not even talking about that. And I kind of joke especially when I work with moms, I'm like, going to the bathroom alone and eating and bathing is not self-care. You're human and that's what you have to do. So I'm like, I've been there. I've had 3 toddlers, like again, but like that's not self-care. That's because you have to stay alive, right? So like, let's just be clear.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
You did say something important in talking about planning. Like you could have never planned that your life would turn out this way. Like we can't plan for that. So even if you want to do all the right things when you're younger and plan things out so that you can follow the path and you can achieve your goals, but you're rigid about it, well, these opportunities would pass you by.
Mm-hmm.
And then creating space. I firmly believe that if you're loading your plate or you're filling your energy with things that no longer fulfill you, then there's no space for anything new to come in. So you have to,
Absolutely.
like you say, weed out. I love that. Weed out things that no longer serve you so that you can make space for new things to come in. But again, going back to mindset, like you were saying too, of wanting everything to work out a certain way, like you could have never, younger self Vanessa could have never said, I will be published down the line. Like again, it
Yeah.
wasn't even part of your thought process or your goals, but
Mm-mm.
you left yourself open to experience life and to see where it took you, and it took you on this beautiful path.
Yeah. And I think like that, if I can just say that, it's like just be just be open. That's also mindset, having that open mindset and paying attention to yourself and paying attention to the little hearts in your matcha latte and to the paying attention to like how does your body feel when you're talking to somebody, or how is it not feeling also, like are there things lacking when you think about, oh, I have to do this project that I've always done for the last 5 years, and if it's feeling like a drain, well, that might be a clue. Like, don't ignore those signs, right? And I also tell people, like, if you weed something out, some weeds grow back, and maybe they're good, maybe they're not, maybe you've plucked a flower. Things will come back to you, I truly believe, if they're meant to come back to you. And so again, it's that control, that element. There's that element of control and surrender. So like, if like I had to weed out an event I had planned for 2 years. It was exciting and fun for me, but I was like, this isn't the direction I want to go in right now. So I had to tell the other people I was working with, hey, like, I can't do this anymore. It's been a great 2 years. And that's when the whole like publishing thing and the coaching thing happened like 2 months later, right? Because I had said, I have to weed this out because I was just sensing it was time. But you have to be really clear with yourself that you're okay with letting some things go, and that it's going to serve your higher self or whatever.
Beautifully said. I love that. I think that's a great place to end off for today. But
Yeah.
before we end off, Vanessa, tell us, how can we work with you as a coach? What kind of programs do you have? How do we contact you? Tell us.
Sure. So I'm social media. I'm on Instagram. That's it. At Vanessa and Wright. I'm on there. I just started my new Substack, Flourish and Flow, which I love writing. So I'm going to be writing more on there. And then my website is just vanessaandwright.com. My coaching right now that I'm mostly doing is Voxer. I love Voxer coaching, one-on-one Voxer programs. It is especially for people I tend to work with. It's like easier to get onto Voxer and have some momentum building that way. So I really love doing that and just really working to reconnect, women in midlife with your creativity, your energy, and your joy. Those are sort of my foundations right now.
Amazing. Well, I will have all of your links in the show notes so
Oh,
people can get to you easily. They could reach out to you.
thank you.
Thank you for today. This was wonderful. What a
Oh, this is so
wonderful
fun.
conversation.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate your time and energy.
Yes, right back at you. Any final words you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, just lean in, everybody. I know it's the new year, but like I would say January is the runway to the year. You don't have to make like all your changes right now. Just think of it as a runway and just like move down it slowly. And then, February you can start taking off and then going. So just give yourself some time and some space to really dream for January.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.